But yeah, again, those are in the chat. And if you guys have any questions about those upcoming meetings, we can, of course, reiterate those and let you guys know specifics about those dates and those times as well, too. But bringing it back to today's meeting, and for the reason we're all here today, yeah, we are very much excited to have you guys all here and to be able to showcase the Reimagine Middle Branch plan and tell you guys a bit about kind of where we've been in the process and also where we're going next, too. And so this meeting tonight is going to be essentially recapping just that, where we've been, next steps in the planning process, and in doing so, giving you guys an overview of the draft plan so you guys can see the work that we've done and updated since the last time we talked to you guys. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to be giving you guys just a quick look at how you can actually view the current plan on the website and actually provide written feedback to be incorporated into the plan in the future. So Megan, if you want to share your screen and we can actually go through the presentation as well, that'd be great.
Sure, just pulling that up now. Jasmine, while I do that, do you want to make your announcements too?
No, Ethan
covered it. Okay, great. Just want to make sure we didn't miss anything.
Thank you.
Cool. So thank you very much, Megan. Actually, if you can go to the next slide, please. So today, this is just the breakdown for today's meeting. Of course, the welcome. Next, I'm going to be going over just some latest news and updates. Again, giving you guys that quick recap of where we've been and then alluding to where we're going next. Afterward, I'm going to pass off to Megan from Field Operations, who just spoke, and she's going to be going over, along with Odessa from Aceto Consulting, going over the Middle Branch plan and giving you all a recap of what the plan entails and updates since the last time you guys have seen the plan itself or heard about it. And then the final section, the final part of this meeting will be time for feedback and Q&A. You guys will have the floor to ask us questions about the plan relative to you, your organization, your community, et cetera. And so with that being said, can I get the next slide, please? And so, yes, so this slide is just project timeline. Of course, the big "we are here" sign indicates, of course, where we are. Since the last time we talked to you, I think it was back in May and June of 2022, so earlier this year, we've been hard at work finalizing the master plan, and we're currently at what we call 95% draft of the plan, getting ready for, of course, 100% completion of it, and then actual adoption by the Planning Commission in early 2023. And not just early 2023, specifically, we're looking and targeting a February 23 date for the Planning Commission and adoption by the Planning Commission. And so in the meantime, since we have been here, we've been doing a bunch of different stuff, namely community engagement. One of the things we had was the ice cream social that happened this past summer, which drew in, I think, over 300 participants who all came out to see and hear about the plan. They came out to Middle Branch Park where we hosted them. And of course, we were with ourselves, our client team, and the rest of our project team vendors as well. On top of that, we've also made significant headway in terms of actually implementing the Middle Branch or the Reimagine Middle Branch project. We actually received $87 million in federal funding to kick off stage 1 of the Middle Branch Resiliency Initiative, which essentially will restore wetlands along the Middle Branch and in and around the Patapsco River, essentially near MedStar Hospital and also near BGE Spring Gardens. And this is actually a press conference that we held back in, I think, October of this year with ourselves and, of course, with other leaders in the city agencies who's without their support, none of this work would be possible. But that $47 million was funded largely by FEMA. It was also funded in part by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, funded in part by Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and also funded by Maryland Department of Natural Resources. And so if we move forward to the next slide, other things that we've been doing in the meantime since we last spoke, Baltimore City Recreation and Parks actually held the grand opening of the Middle Branch Fitness and Wellness Center, which was a huge milestone. I don't know if you guys have been out to see it yet, but it's a great facility that I think really is becoming the center of recreation, whether it be indoor or outdoor for South Baltimore, like this facility is meant to be. So I would highly, again, recommend that you guys go out and see it if you guys have not yet done it. And that kind of brings us to where we are today. And this slide right here is the quick recap of course, the study area for the Reimagine Middle Branch project, and highlights some of course, the major points that our program and our project is working on. But with that being said, the plan actually builds upon some of the core existing plans that are already going on in and around Baltimore City. Namely, we have the Baltimore City Green Network Plan, we have the Baltimore Sustainability Plan, and we have the Baltimore Complete Streets plans. And so these plans really do lay the foundation for which the Reimagine Middle Branch project builds off of. And that building off of was actually first captured in the project brief, which you guys may have seen back in 2021. This is actually some of the first content that we produced for the Reimagine Middle Branch project. And the plan that we have now actually capitalizes and expands off of a lot of the content that was introduced in this project brief. So next slide, please. And essentially the plan as it is right now has more or less 5 main goals, and 5 kind of focus areas too. One being inclusive programs and activities, making sure that the programming that happens in and around the Middle Branch area is inclusive and is activated by, of course, people who live in the communities in and around those areas where the programs are. The same thing applies to access and connections as well too, making sure that anything, whether it be new developments, new programs, new spaces, new green or open spaces, are accessible and well connected to people in and around the community as well. That kind of plays into economic equity as well, making sure that people in neighborhoods are actually connected to the new developments, the new economic opportunities that may be implemented with this project. And the same thing applies to recreation and environmental resilience as well too, making sure that whatever infrastructure, whatever green infrastructure that is going to be put in place is made accessible and inclusive of all who live there. And so the plan itself, which again is available on our website currently, essentially has 4 volumes and 1 executive summary. And here you can see that each bullet has kind of like a little blurb detailing essentially what each plan or each volume, entails for the plan. And so actually, if you go to the plan right now or go to the website, which I actually just put in the chat, you can actually view the plan itself and see the different volumes that are broken up and that are represented here on the screen. Now, I think what's important to keep in mind is that in terms of the feedback we're collecting, which you can also see on the website itself, the feedback it's more so critical feedback that we're looking for. We're trying to catch red flags, things that overlap with the community. So as you click the link that I just put in the chat, please pay attention to that. And that'll be the kind of feedback that we're looking to collect from you guys and from the public. But it is out there and available. So please, when you get the chance, click that link and go ahead and check out the plan on the website. And so with that being said, I'll pass off to my colleague, Megan, to give you an overview of the plan itself and to go more in depth on kind of what is in the actual project.
Thank you, Ethan. And thank you all for being here tonight. It's really great to see you, see how many people have come out. We had a session last night as well. It's great to see familiar names from sort of the last 1.5 years of doing engagement in public meetings. It's also great to see new people here. So welcome. If this is your first Reimagine Middle Branch meeting, we're so happy you're here. We're really looking forward to your input and feedback. I'll say if you have questions throughout the next series of slides that Odessa and I are going to present, please ask those questions in the chat. You can do it that way. You can also hold your questions until the end of the presentation and we can have a conversation at that point. Either one works. We'll be sure that we answer your questions and relay those at the end of the presentation if that's the route you'd like to take. If you want to add questions in the chat, please direct those to Christina Bigby or Jason Latati. There are 2 team members who are kind of behind the scenes here collecting those questions for us that will then get answered after the presentation. It's tough for me to see questions coming in as we present, so we're trying to divvy up and divide and conquer here tonight during the meeting. So I think with that, hopefully those are some good kind of ground rules for tonight. And we'll get started with sharing the plan with you. As we started working on the plan, along with looking at the past plans, which Ethan described, sort of thinking through the project brief, knowing that was sort of guiding our work, defining goals for the project. We also wanted to look at the place in particular, Baltimore as a city, the Middle Branch as sort of one of the major waterfronts of the city, and how the city itself is connected to its landscape, to the landscape of the Chesapeake Bay. We also thought about the city itself and the relationship of water to land in Baltimore, the Inner Harbor being the commercial and sort of civic hub of the city. The port is obviously the industrial engine of the city. And the other piece of shoreline in Baltimore that's not the Inner Harbor or the port is the Middle Branch. And we see the Middle Branch as the green recreational center for the city. This is our sort of big vision for the next 20 years. And all of the recommendations and improvements you see tonight in the plan point towards that. When we zoom in further to look at the study area, when we define what is the Middle Branch, we have a really expansive definition. We're not only looking at the shoreline where land meets water, we're looking at the water itself, and we're looking at the collection of open spaces and parks in South Baltimore. And we're also thinking about the 19 neighborhoods that comprise the community of the Middle Branch. Those 19 neighborhoods are really diverse, are filled with different communities, with different histories and different legacies and different futures. So we need to be sure that our development initiatives, our ideas about parks and engagement and inclusivity are really wide-reaching and address each of these communities. When we look at the open spaces and the parks, we think of them as a network. There are 30 of them or over 30 of them in South Baltimore today. It's a really rich tapestry of green spaces. Our job is to connect these spaces and to activate these spaces and to create sort of one holistic park shed. And finally, those 11 miles of shoreline and the wide open expansive views of the water. This is such an incredible asset for South Baltimore. It's so unique in the city compared to other places, other neighborhoods, and other regions. And so how do we really harness the shoreline and lift up the shoreline and make the water the sort of center and the heart of this part of Baltimore? The people, obviously, along with the land and the place, the people create the place here and the incredible communities around South Baltimore. We've been so fortunate and honored to be working with the communities over the past 2 years on this plan, and we're looking forward to hearing from you tonight as well. When we started this project, we were given this mission, really, by Frank Lance, the Director of Parks and People, to think about this not as a traditional master plan. It's not a collection of capital projects that are going to be implemented over the next 20 years. This is an environmental justice project that has capital elements within it. It's about restoring the health of the Middle Branch and South Baltimore for the people of South Baltimore. One of the ways we did that, along with shaping this long-term 20-year vision for South Baltimore, we also sort of thought about environmental justice and thought about equity and wanted to take that very seriously now, here and now. So as we worked on this long-term vision, we also produced, directed, and completed several different what we called equity initiatives. So these were real-time projects working with people in the communities to in education and in outreach and in activation. My partner, Odessa Phillip, is going to talk through these equity initiatives as well as our engagement work. I think Odessa's been having a bit of trouble with her Wi-Fi, so we'll see if she jumps on here. If she doesn't, I'm just gonna keep going and continue. So Odessa, if you are here, please turn your video on and you can chime in whenever you're ready. But just to keep going.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you. There you
awesome.
are. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to make sure. So I dialed in from my phone as well. So just wanted to highlight, as Megan said, some of the engagement efforts that we've had over this project time. We started and ended. We kind of bookended with the community. And I think that's a really important piece to make sure that we emphasize. But we also saw the importance of using local resources and starting to bring the next generation forward into this engagement effort. So we connected with Morgan State University and had a fellowship and actually paid, I think that's important to say also, these participants to be part of this entire process. We had a series of opportunities for them to provide input and also to do a project that would help them from for their own professional development. This Morgan State Fellowship was allowed us to have landscape architects, people interested in outreach and engagement, as well as planners involved in the process. We also saw the value of having a community design lab at a level beneath college, and that was with local high school attendees. The community design lab really gave these younger students an opportunity to weigh in on a planning process in a way that was really meaningful. You see in the upper left corner, they're looking at actual design plans out in the field, getting an opportunity to really weigh in and to help us understand the needs from their generational perspective. You also see that we had them in a lot of classroom-like settings, but outside where we use the outdoors as their classroom setting. Now, this was one of my favorite events. We had Splash that many of you were able to attend and got an opportunity to see the real value of bringing people to the waterfront. Bringing the communities in an opportunity to learn how to kayak and row, to learn how to fish, to interact with their other neighbors, and also to really show them, show all of the members of the community how important it is to have activated park spaces, spaces that they can come to gather and really get an opportunity to enjoy being outdoors in their own community. Really important, though, was recognizing that we could not expect all engagement to be us hosting an event and people coming to us. Getting out into the community was really a core value and a core strategy that we identified early in the process. We created this mobile project hub, which, as I mentioned this morning on another meeting, was really quite heavy. It was about 80 pounds, but we took it with us anyway into the neighborhoods. We wanted to have an opportunity for people to get all of the information about the project. And the mobile project hub was painted by a local artist. And then we took it out, we asked people survey questions. We really used it as an opportunity to go to you. We went to events that were being hosted by communities. And when people asked, we tried to make sure we could be there. One of our other really key efforts was the social media effort, the Voices of the Middle Branch. We asked for volunteers from the community to provide us their stories. And then we shared this information on a series of social media posts titled Voices of the Middle Branch, and used that as a way to really connect people and understand their why and their relationship to the water, to South Baltimore. And it was really quite helpful to get a better understanding of what people's needs and understandings were. So when we look at this engagement, what was really important is that this plan was driven by the community. We were given the charge by Dr. Lance to make this an environmental justice project with capital elements. And by doing that, we also committed to making the community the driver of our engine. We started with meetings, with these series of committee meetings, and we started that with a meeting with the Community Advisory Committee. And that was really made up of representatives from the 19 neighborhoods within South Baltimore, as well as others who are interested in the project getting an opportunity through a series of other committees, an executive committee, a steering committee, a science and technology committee. But we met with these groups periodically over the course of the project to get an opportunity to test ideas, share information, get feedback, and help us to tweak the plan so that it would ultimately be not just a community-driven plan, but a community-supported plan. This list of teeny tiny writing is a list of all of the stakeholder meetings that we attended. And this is important just so you can understand the magnitude of our efforts in terms of engagement. Of course, a large part of this effort happened during the COVID epidemic. And so we could not just do what we had traditionally done only here. We had a series of virtual engagement meetings. And what we tried to do in those meetings was use tools that would allow us to get feedback in much the same way that we would have gotten if we were in a public setting in person. So if you see here in the middle two frames, you'll see that we had large sticky notes that people were able to paste on to specific areas on the plan and provide their input, their thoughts, feedback. We use this information, in one of these, you see a big yes, something that someone liked, and then you see a red sticky with something they probably didn't like, but all of this was useful in helping us to frame what the plan actually included. When we think about in-person engagement, we were able to close out with the ice cream social that Ethan mentioned early. We also did have Splash. We also had opportunities where we took the mobile project hub out into the community. But we did recognize that we couldn't stick to just one tool and one technique to be able to reach people. We had a number of surveys that people participated in as well. Our project website, reimaginemb.com, was one of the places that we continued to share information, as well as our social media campaign. So let's just kind of give you perspective, public engagement by the numbers. At the end of this process, we have over 600 social media followers, and we built that engagement from the beginning. So there were no followers, and then we had to create an entire social media effort with content that would keep attention. Of the surveys that we had over 500 responses and over 300 attendees at our public meetings. We held those stakeholder workshops like I just told you, and we had more than 35 community meetings that we attended. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Megan.
Thank you, Odessa. I want to pick up where we left off with folks in May and June at our last set of public meetings and with our last survey. What we heard at that point about our work were several positive things, several confirmations about the work we were doing. And then there were some questions and concerns about things we may have left out. So picking up here, we're going to show you this and then demonstrate how we address this feedback in our final draft plan. So we first heard a lot of support for park improvements and features we were showing, in particular around the waterfront. We also heard a lot of excitement about the trails and complete streets, how we were connecting the shoreline and the water to the neighborhoods. And finally, a lot of enthusiasm for features that celebrate African-American history in South Baltimore, including a new park where the former Black Sox Park was in Westport, and a heritage trail that connects several sites around South Baltimore. The questions and outstanding issues that we heard were mainly on these four topics. The first was about environmental justice and really the quality of the environment, about water quality, about air quality, and about flooding and resilience and the future impacts of climate change. We're going to get into in more detail sort of how we're addressing each of those environmental challenges that South Baltimore faces, in particular water quality in the Middle Branch. The second issue that was really outstanding was around displacement of existing communities. So what are we doing to protect the families and the people and the businesses who are in South Baltimore today? And how do we ensure that they're able to stay in their communities and benefit from these investments that are coming in the next 20 years? We're going to share some details with you on anti-displacement policies and ideas we have that are layered into the plan. And we also invite you to read more about that in our plan online. Next, we heard people wanted more details and specifics on our economic development plans. We have some details, more details to share with you on those tonight. And finally, implementation. How are we going to make this all happen? We've heard from the beginning of this process that the big images are really pretty, the design vision is really exciting, but how are we going to make this happen and how are we going to make this a reality? So we are working we've sort of formed an engagement plan, or sorry, not engagement, we formed an implementation plan that addresses the how and the why and the when of how are we going to get this all done. So now I want to walk you through the design vision, really the heart of the Reimagine Middle Branch plan. This is about physical transformation based in particular places around the Middle Branch for all of South Baltimore. We've structured the physical transformations, the improvements, the projects within these 4 what we call equity frameworks. They address the shoreline and how do we protect and restore a green shoreline around those 11 miles of the Middle Branch. We're addressing connectivity in our 2nd framework by transforming barriers, large transportation infrastructure today, highways and railways, that make it difficult for people in the communities of South Baltimore to reach the Middle Branch. How do we transform those into actually elements of connection? Our 3rd framework is about the park system and how do we make parks that feel inclusive and active for the people who live here. And finally, equitable economic development. How do we pair these open space and public realm improvements with development to create jobs and wealth in the community? All of these frameworks get layered together into our synthesized Reimagine Middle Branch plan. And so you see here the sort of final result, or draft, I'll say draft final result of how these 4 frameworks get layered together in space in the neighborhoods around the Middle Branch. So to start, we want to walk you through each of these frameworks, give you a sort of top line understanding of key strategies and the recommendations that are coming out of this plan. And then if you're interested in any of these frameworks, learning more details about one of those or all of those, we invite you to read the plan online. So to protect and restore the shoreline, to create a green soft edge for the Middle Branch. This is important for a number of reasons. Creating a living shoreline or a green shoreline expands habitat. It improves sort of ecology of the area. It prevents erosion from happening. It also will do a large part in improving water quality. So where there are pollutants entering the Middle Branch, we're able to capture those and filter those in constructed wetlands to slowly improve the water quality of the Middle Branch, because we know that that's a major, major issue today. These green infrastructure techniques are going to divert runoff and trash from entering the water to begin with, so that that water quality can improve. Along with the sort of physical features and improvements of changing and modifying the shoreline, we want to think of the Middle Branch as a platform for learning and education and science. So how can we take these new innovative living shorelines, these innovative sort of groundbreaking constructed wetlands, and make them places for people to learn about resiliency, about climate change, about water quality? Everyone from young elementary school students to PhD candidates and professors at nearby institutions and universities, this being a platform for innovation and science in the future. And finally, we want to partner with, there's a very innovative partnership with the Port of Maryland to utilize dredged material in a safe way from the port to build out these shorelines, to use that material as our foundation to build the new shorelines and build the new wetlands. This is an image, a vision of what we think this new living green shoreline can include. It can include places for people with new trails and boardwalks and paths. It includes ways to access the water and access the green that aren't there today. And it also includes these ecological features like tidal creeks and intertidal wetlands and green shoreline edges that improve the habitat and the ecology and the water quality for the Middle Branch. These living shoreline projects are beginning now, which is really exciting. Ethan mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, $47 million in funding, which is coming from FEMA, coming from the state, coming from the county and the city, a sort of total collaboration between all levels of government to fund this work. That's how important it is. The projects that are funded now and that are in design are at numbers 2, 3, and 7 on this map. And over the next 20 years, we see the rest of these shoreline projects coming together to make an almost totally contiguous green soft shoreline for the Middle Branch. This is a picture and a vision of what that shoreline could be. It's soft and green. It's about bringing people to nature. It's about bringing nature back to the Middle Branch itself, as well as recreation and other amenities for people. So you see a fishing pier that's incorporated with these wetlands and marshes. It's really important that these shorelines are for people, as well as for water, as well as for plants and animals. And how innovative and incredible would it be to see these marshes and wetlands and shorelines really see the Chesapeake Bay back here again at Ridgely's Cove underneath the highway, such a unique and innovative urban environment. The potential here is incredible, and we're so excited to see this happen. We have a number of key planning recommendations throughout our design vision and implementation strategies. These are really get into the nitty-gritty and the details of what this plan recommends. Ethan mentioned that we are at a moment in our process where we are preparing for final approval by the City of Baltimore's Planning Commission. What this means, and if the Planning Commission adopts this plan, is that these recommendations become the official direction of the city. This means they carry weight, they carry value moving forward in terms of what is developed here in the Middle Branch, sort of how to direct any future projects here. So this is, it looks a bit wonky and sort of policy driven, but it's quite important for us in our design process. I'm not going to read through all of these with you tonight. I welcome you to sort of take a quick skim right now, but then dig into those again on the sort of in reading the plan on the website later for you. Now I want to talk about transportation and connectivity. Access, we've heard from day one, along with water quality, are really the two major challenges that face the Middle Branch today. People just simply can't get to the water easily, and we want to make it much easier, much safer for everyone in all modes of transportation to access their waterfront. So we've devised a network of connectivity that's based on sort of a new system of trails, a loop trail and a shoreline trail, these circumnavigating the waterfront and creating better high quality access for bikes and pedestrians, joggers and runners and walkers around the Middle Branch. It's also about major pieces of infrastructure, a new east-west bridge crossing Ridgely's Cove, improvements to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Bridge. Those are the two, the major crossings to get you across the water. Along with those trails and those bridges, it's about complete streets. It's about improving the streets for all users in the neighborhoods around the Middle Branch, so that folks from Lakeland and folks from South Baltimore and folks from Federal Hill can reach all the way, those distant neighborhoods can reach the water here too. And finally, it's not just about bikes and pedestrians, it's also about cars, it's also about trucks and industry and freight access. We know that the port and the industrial areas in South Baltimore are so important to the economy of the city, for the economy of this area, for job creation. We need to ensure that there is high quality, well-functioning, efficient access to those places. So we're looking at key targeted improvements to the infrastructure network to improve access for these important folks as well. So the trails, what do they look like? We're thinking about separated use trails, which are really the sort of best standard, sort of highest standard for recreational trails out there. We want to create a loop, a 3-mile loop around the Middle Branch that would cross both bridges and loop through the waterfront park. This is a view of that east-west bridge that would cross Ridgely's Cove between Port Covington and Westport and Mount Winans, not along the existing rail corridors you can see, but bowing out slightly north of that to connect at key moments on either side. But really it's about creating high quality access east-west across the water between Mount Winans, Westport, and Port Covington. Looking at improvements to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Bridge, here what we're seeking to do is to take the 5th lane of traffic, that flex lane, and think about transforming that into space for people and bikes. This may be an interim strategy, knowing that there is a structural assessment being done of the bridge today. We know that there are major challenges and issues that this bridge faces. If it's learned in this study that the bridge is not structurally safe for trucks and for cars and everyone who uses it today, the recommendation will be to move forward with a new bridge. However, on that new bridge or on this existing bridge, no matter which bridge it is, the balance of users having safe access for people and bikes, as well as cars and trucks, is the plan's priority. Looking at a complete street, this is what our vision for what a complete street includes. It's really about including spaces for all users on a street and making sure that it's efficient and safe and enjoyable for all of those users. Those users are trucks, cars, buses, bikes, pedestrians, and everything in between. So we're looking at greening streets, adding new street trees for shade and for better comfort. We're looking at separated use facilities for bikes where we can, new sidewalks along the length of these streets, as well as improving the quality of the crossings and the intersections to make those safe as well. When we look at that map of complete streets, we're really working from the legislation that was passed in the city a few years back. That legislation did not assign priority streets around the city. What we're trying to do is move that complete streets work forward here in South Baltimore by identifying priority streets for improvements in the future. The streets we've identified here, the reason we've identified these is all about connections between neighborhoods themselves and then connections to the water. So how can we improve streets that might be a barrier today, like Waterview Avenue, which creates a barrier between Cherry Hill and Middle Branch Park? How can we actually make that a place that people can use to sort of safely access the neighborhood and the park space? The plan also recommends, as I said, sort of targeted key improvements to truck and freight infrastructure as well, so that there's better, more efficient access between the interstate highway system and the port and industrial areas. As a summary, we have a number of plan recommendations as well in this framework, and I welcome you to read these in the plan if this is of interest to you. Our next framework is about the parks and open spaces. It's about making them active and inclusive around the Middle Branch. Our key strategies to do this are about coordinating capital projects and programming across the area, across what we're calling our park shed. It's about linking the shoreline parks and open spaces and creating connections to neighborhood parks. It's about creating waterfront anchors that draw diverse uses and support operating costs. We know that the water is the incredible asset and amenity here. We want to ring that water with public parks and public spaces, and we want to fill them with activities and opportunities for events, for performances, and for gathering. We want to expand programming that's already today really successful and enable the programs there today to grow and to thrive, like the kayak and canoe programs and rowing programs that are already in Middle Branch Park. This is the whole park shed. When we say park shed, that's a little bit like a watershed. It's about the collection of parks in this area. We want to see these parks working together to be really efficient and effective for the communities here. The parks and open spaces that we've really focused on in the plan are the parks at the waterfront. We see these as a ring of waterfront parks that are connected and continuous, that create a totally public waterfront for South Baltimore, which is a really unique thing in Baltimore. We're looking at better ways to access and connect from neighborhoods to communities. So this is an example at Seaman Avenue in Middle Branch Park. Today, this intersection doesn't exist, but we would like to connect Seaman Avenue and cross Waterview Avenue and make a new pedestrian-friendly connection so that folks in Cherry Hill can easily and seamlessly and safely get to Middle Branch Park. Once we're in the park, we want to create more spaces, as I mentioned, for events and performances. This is the lawn that's there today, improved with a new planting, new lawn, and a new stage for performances. Next to that lawn, we're looking at an event pavilion. This would be a place for cookouts and barbecues and family gatherings. We heard in many of our surveys over and over, there's just no there. There's just no place to be with my family. I want to have a cookout. I want to have a barbecue. I want to have a baby shower. Where do I do that in the park? The boathouse is so beloved, but it is booked solid. And so we know that there is a demand for these types of spaces. Can we create many, many more of them around the Middle Branch? Thinking about families and kids as well, sort of how to create spaces that are friendly and attractive for families in the neighborhoods around the Middle Branch. We know that the neighborhoods south of the Middle Branch have a really high percentage of kids and families in them. And so we want to make spaces that work for that community. Another community we want to support, another community that's thriving in Middle Branch Park today is the boating community. Baltimore Community Rowing and Baltimore Rec and Parks both run incredibly successful programs, learning to row, learning to canoe, and learning to kayak in the Middle Branch. We're showing here a new boathouse that would expand facilities and allow both of these programs to grow, to store their boats inside, which they want to do, to have other types of education and programming and event spaces. So this all together sort of creates a more inclusive and active park network and park shed. Again, I invite you to read our full list of recommendations in our plan on our website. And finally, our last framework is about development. It's about generating wealth in neighborhoods, preventing displacement in neighborhoods, and ensuring that all the investments we're making benefit the communities, the longstanding communities of South Baltimore today. Our key strategies for doing this, we have 4. It's about sustaining and expanding investments in youth, workforce development, small businesses, and CDC capacity building. Much of this programming is happening already between City of Baltimore and South Baltimore Gateway Partnership. As a part of this plan, as Odessa mentioned at the beginning, we piloted programs, youth education programs, both with our Morgan State Fellowship and with our Community Design Lab. We want to see those programs happen annually to really create a pipeline of opportunity and access for youth and students, particularly people of color, sort of into the industry of planning and design and the built environment. We want to assemble capital for equitable investment and housing and mixed-use development. We want to establish an African American Heritage District that's rooted in historical commemoration, but also current cultural expression of African American, Black communities in South Baltimore. And finally, we want to support green social venture enterprises and new business startups. We looked at where to make these investments and where to concentrate those investments, and we're looking at sort of high priority neighborhoods based on demographics. As I mentioned before, we want to continue the equity initiatives that we have piloted as part of this plan, both with high school students and with college students. The idea of an African American Heritage District would honor the incredible history and heritage that's in South Baltimore today by recognizing these sites, by making these sites more visible, by connecting these sites, and by activating these sites with new cultural and arts programming. The idea of a green social venture, this is one example of something we're showing in the plan. This is a tree and plant nursery that would grow the trees for the green streets and the complete streets, that would grow the plant material for the new shoreline project, so that we would be growing the plants and growing the materials to construct these new parks and these new shorelines. We'd be employing folks in South Baltimore and partnering with local nonprofits who are already doing growing and farming in the area. The boathouse today that's beloved. If we move the boating program to a new building, we're left with an opportunity and a space that can be filled with other activity. We see this as a great opportunity for a marketplace to welcome local vendors with small businesses to set up shop here in the boathouse to create a marketplace that's open to all the visitors to the park. So in total, I sort of hit on some highlights of equitable development, hit on a few example projects. If you're interested in this aspect of the project, I welcome you to read our sort of comprehensive look and take with our plan recommendations and our framework in the plan online. And the next thing I want to do is just take a short walk around the Middle Branch and sort of show you how all these frameworks and these ideas and these recommendations come together geographically across South Baltimore. So we're going to start in the south and move our way north and look at before and after plans to give you a sense of what's there today, what we see for the next 20 years, and then a few animations and videos to help color the ideas as well. So here we are in south, sort of on the south end of our project site at Curtis Bay in Brooklyn, and where those neighborhoods meet the Middle Branch. In the future, we're looking at a series of, as you can see, access and connectivity is really important here. It's almost impossible to get to the waterfront here today. So we're looking at a number of complete streets, a number of trail systems. We want to open up Reedbird Island to public access. It's not accessible today. And we want to improve the Hanover and Potee corridor, which you'll see more of in our animation. So here in this animation, you start to see a fly through. We start over the Patapsco and kind of come down onto the Hanover and Potee corridor. Here we're looking at sort of making new traffic routes and new access points to make these safer, more neighborhood streets rather than the kind of highways that they are today. Looking at ways to integrate the bridge and where the bridge lands into this new Hanover Potee corridor. Along Waterview Avenue, which we see here today, again, sort of rethinking Waterview Avenue, making this more of a neighborhood street, creating new intersections and crossings for people so that there's much better access to Middle Branch Park. Once we're in the park, you can start to see the trail network, the separated used bike and pedestrian trails, how they wind through the park. And then you can see the large event lawn where we can have either small neighborhood performances or sort of big events like the Cherry Hill Arts and Music Festival, which happens on 4th of July every year. That takes us to the central precinct of the Middle Branch that we're looking at. This is sort of Cherry Hill on the bottom of our screen, Lakeland, Mount Winans, Westport. In the future, we're looking at a connected system of parks, this wide new green shoreline, and the series of complete streets that would connect neighborhoods to the water. I'll also note that in pink, we're mentioning heritage sites. These are part of the African American Heritage District. These are places that we want to call out and honor and commemorate, and these could be sites for future arts and culture programming. In this animation, you start to fly over, we're sort of looking south to Middle Branch Park into Cherry Hill in the background. In the park itself, you can see the sort of new collection of buildings and structures that would really animate the park and allow for a lot more programming and events to happen here. The event pavilion, the former boathouse, which would be sort of adaptively reused as a marketplace, and the new boathouse for Baltimore Community Rowing and Baltimore Rec and Parks. As you can see, lots of space and opportunity for people to gather, for people to have cookouts, for people to get together for socializing and parties on the water, and to just sort of enjoy being in the park on the water on a great day. You'll see here as we turn out towards the water, sort of looking at improving the piers, knowing that the piers are the most active place on the water today. Everyone's out there fishing, everyone wants to be on the water, so having more of those in the parks and having improved access to those is a key feature in the plan as well. And finally, this is the north end of the site. This is where the Middle Branch meets Richley's Cove, where we meet the Gwynns Falls, Carroll Camden, the Entertainment District, Carroll Park, and neighborhoods to the north. In the future, we envision Ridgely's Cove as being this very green marshland, this more passive and ecological park where we're able to clean water and sort of make a very resilient, absorbent landscape that will help protect low-lying areas like Carroll Camden and the Entertainment District and the neighborhoods there from flooding in the future. Also in this area, you'll note that we've highlighted certain areas for development. This is a 20-year long-term plan. We would be remiss if we did not acknowledge the incinerator site here, which is a major source of air pollution for South Baltimore. What could that be in the future? Could that be something other than an incinerator down the road? In the plan online, you'll see different scenarios and sketches that we've dreamed up really just for conversation with people to start that conversation now, knowing that a lot of work will need to happen into the future to see a different alternative there down the road. This final animation shows the East-West Bridge, how that bridge connects Westport to Port Covington with the new bike and pedestrian facilities. You also see here small bridges and overlooks over these big new expansive marshes and constructed wetlands. And looking over to the future Port Covington development. We're crossing here, we're coming up to the Swing Bridge, which is such a beloved industrial feature and relic out on the water today. We would love to connect to this feature. We're working hard to think about ways to do this. so that everyone could enjoy that and be out there on the water in the future. So that's the sort of summation of the design vision. That's our vision for the next 20 years for the Middle Branch. We want to touch on our strategies for implementation, knowing that these are big, lofty goals. We need to have really serious plans in place for how we do this and when we do this and how it's funded. In our implementation strategy, we have 4 sort of plans or 4 avenues that we're looking at. We're looking at funding and how these projects would be funded, not only the design and construction of these projects, but also the maintenance and operations, the ongoing work and upkeep that these new parks and spaces will need. We've also looked at phasing strategically when these projects should come online, what should come first, what's already happening, how do we sort of build on the momentum of the great projects that have opened recently. We need to think about permitting. This is the sort of technical aspect of the project, but quite important when we're working at the shoreline and over water. We're working with agencies like the Army Corps of Engineers and the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, so that we're ensuring that our projects don't get held up in permitting, but we're able to get the key approvals we need from regulatory agencies to move this work forward. And finally, we're looking at management strategies, knowing that these parks are going to need more maintenance, more operations, more management than Baltimore Rec and Parks or the city could do on their own. There needs to be a sort of layering of support in the area. How do we do this? What does that look like? We're going to touch on that. When we think about funding, our strategies really work from leveraging the funding that's there today. There's incredible opportunity in the casino revenues that come in annually every year in a very consistent way. How can we work from that as a foundation, leverage that money, seek out money from all levels of government, seek out money from other grant and nonprofit and philanthropic resources to pool money for these projects. We know that these projects aren't all going to be funded by the city of Baltimore or by any one agency or any level of government. So it's about layering them together, finding strategic ways to bring money together for a project. The FEMA funding and the funding for the shoreline, the new wetlands, is an amazing, incredible example that can then be repeated for the next 20 years for many other projects around the Middle Branch. When we think about phasing, we want to think about sort of working from what is there today. What are the projects underway and recently completed? We want to work from those, and those are going to catalyze and catapult new projects in the future. What comes next over the next 5 years is a really important moment to sort of work from the momentum we have. What are those key projects that want to come online next? We think connectivity is very important for the next 5 years. How do we create that loop around the Middle Branch? How do we get people to the water? Is something that's very, very important to this group. Beyond getting people to the water, beyond creating that loop and giving that access, we want to think about building out what we call the heart of the Middle Branch, the 2 or 3 major park spaces and anchor park spaces around the Middle Branch Park, Smith Cove, and Ridgely's Cove. And finally, from that heart, how do we grow and extend into communities? How do we extend down the Patapsco and up the Gwynn Falls? How do we engage with developments that are happening nearby to make the most of those and make those very public and make those very green and make sure that they're following the recommendations set out by this plan? So altogether, we're looking at sort of series of projects over the next 20 years. Again, a lot of information, a lot of sort of dense information on the slide. Welcome you to read more about this in our plan online. When we think about permitting, this is, as I said, a sort of technical aspect of the project. This is about sort of creating mitigation banks and allowing projects to leverage one another to really make permitting and approvals really efficient for all projects here. When we think about management and stewardship of this place, first and foremost, all of this work needs a champion, needs someone or an entity, a group, an organization that's out there thinking about the Middle Branch every day, making sure this work is happening both in terms of design and construction, as well as maintenance and operations. We've put together a plan as one of our implementation strategies of how to build and incubate and grow this entity, this governance entity, how they would fund themselves, how they would operate, and what they would oversee across the middle branch. So that altogether sort of comprises Reimagine Middle Branch, both the physical transformation of the place, as well as when we will do it, how we will do it, and how it will get funded. I'm going to turn it back over to Ethan to wrap up and move us into Q&A.
Thanks, Megan. And great job too. That was a great overview. And also thank you to Odessa as well too for recapping the project, which again, pretty expansive, but I highly implore you all to go check out the plan on the website too. Like I said, just to reiterate, we are currently, in the final stages of putting the final touches on the Reimagine Middle Branch plan. The next steps is to get that finalized and get that complete, and then bring it to the Baltimore City Planning Commission in February 2023. And in order to do that, we're of course working closely with, of course, us, the client team, but we're also seeking key feedback from you all too, just to make sure that we're not missing anything, or just to make sure that there are no red flags or no conflicts between you, your work, whether you're a student or an organization or an entity or whatever it may be, no conflicts with stuff that is going on within your work too. And thank you, Christina, for putting that in the chat as well. There is a link to the Reimagine Middle Branch website where you can actually see the plans in their full and in their entirety. And you can read all 4 volumes. In addition to that, you can also complete a Google form, which is also linked on the same webpage as well too. And that Google form will essentially enable you to put in that critical feedback that we are seeking. And again, just to reiterate, feedback does close at the end of the month, specifically December 23rd. And I guess just 2 things to keep in mind, just to reiterate again, because I can't do it enough, but the feedback that we are seeking, it's red flags and anything that's unique to your organization, and anything that you see that's in direct conflict with whatever plans or projects that you guys already have going on. And on top of that as well, would be remiss if I did not stress that the plans that are available online are indeed the draft version of the plans. They are 95%. This is what you see online will not be what is presented at the Planning Commission next year. And also on top of that, despite the fact that we are getting the plan ready to be complete, this is still not the final engagement that will be happening in terms of the Reimagine Middle Branch project. The plan itself is this kind of 30,000-foot all-encompassing vision for what South Baltimore can look like. And it's done so through, of course, key community input. That's how it got to where it is today too. But in terms of the next phases, whether it's the implementation phase or the actual, construction phase, all of those additional phases will essentially go back to the drawing board. We'll build upon what's outlined here, but again, in those next phases, we'll be seeking additional community feedback as well too.